Boyfriend's ex is suddenly turning their daughter into a weapon against him, and now we are at each other's throats. I've been with my boyfriend for a year and a half now, and about 3 months ago, we took the leap and moved in together. It's been a big step, but one I was excited for. He has a daughter with his ex, but they broke up 3 years before our paths ever crossed. I'd only spoken to his ex a handful of times, always brief, but she seemed perfectly pleasant in those moments. Still, I could always tell she stressed him out, even when he tried to hide. He was open with me from the start that their relationship had been strained since the divorce, but he insisted he was trying hard to keep things cordial for the sake of their daughter. In the beginning, it was minor. He'd come back from handovers a little more tense than usual, then admit he'd had to put his foot down or brush off one of her passive-aggressive comments. It was a manageable level of drama. But recently, things have derailed. Now, his ex seems determined to make life as difficult as possible. There was the time we planned a weekend getaway, only for her to suddenly threaten to keep their daughter from him if we dared to go. All the money we put down for the trip down the drain, just like that. Then she started demanding more money, saying she'd refuse visitation if he didn't comply. And then, without warning, his daughter didn't come over for 3 weekends straight, a huge shift from their usual routine. He was furious but resigned, saying there was nothing he could do since the courts always side with her. I can't figure out what triggered this change. For all their past strain, she had never weaponized their daughter before. For the most part, her jabs had been superficial, him getting compared to her new boyfriend during handovers, childish insults, that sort of thing. But this escalation feels sudden and out of character. I started to wonder if maybe she was upset that we'd moved in together, but then again, when that happened, she took their daughter for the weekend to let us settle in. She even helped their daughter pick out a thoughtful moving-in gift for me. That kind of gesture doesn't really fit with someone who disapproves of me or is jealous, right? There have been moments of real kindness. Sometimes my boyfriend's daughter and I do Disney movie marathons at home, and if her mom hears about it, she'll send over snacks for us. She never seemed to mind our bond. In fact, she got her daughter a cinema gift card for Christmas, enough for the two of us to catch a bunch of movies together, and wrote in the card that it was so both of us could go out. She didn't get me a separate gift or anything, but she chose something for her daughter that she knew we would enjoy as a pair. Again, not the behavior of someone harboring secret animosity towards me, right? But now, day in and day out, I listen to complaint after complaint from my boyfriend. His ex is demanding more and more, threatening him, and their daughter is around less and less. I can't make sense of how things spiraled from manageable tension to outright hostility so quickly, especially when at least on the surface she's never seemed to have an issue with me. The other night, things hit a breaking point. He was so wound up over everything that he started trying to bait me into an argument, something he's never done before. I finally told him we should pause and let him cool off because he just wasn't himself, and that's when he snapped and screamed at me, calling me just another controlling bitch and blaming me for his issues seeing his daughter. Then he stormed out and didn't come home until the next morning. When he finally did, he apologized and explained he was just stressed because his ex-wife is being a bitch as usual. But things haven't really gone back to normal. Since then, he's become short-tempered, picking at everything I say as if I'm criticizing him or taking potshots at his character. He's defensive and constantly on edge with me now, and he's started to criticize me, something he never used to do. It's like our happy, easy relationship has evaporated overnight, and I'm left trying to piece together what exactly changed because I genuinely can't see the trigger, and I can't help but wonder where that leaves us now. Chickened out. Instead, we just talked about her daughter's birthday plans. That whole week, we texted back and forth coordinating everything I said I'd help with for the birthday. Eventually, I finally worked up the courage to send her a more direct message, asking why her daughter hadn't been allowed over as often. I worded it carefully, trying not to sound accusatory, just checking if everything was okay, if the daughter was feeling alright, and if there was anything I could do to help, like driving her over myself. She didn't reply until the next day. The weight left me spiraling, feeling like maybe I'd really screwed up. But when she finally texted back the next afternoon, she apologized for going silent and said we should probably meet for coffee again. So, we did. What I learned in that conversation raised more questions than it answered. The reality was messy, one of those situations where every new answer opens another door. For starters, it wasn't the ex keeping their daughter away. My boyfriend had been the one making excuses for not having her over, blaming illness, work, all sorts of reasons. There had been a fight about money, but that was about the ex pushing back after he'd gone over a month not seeing their daughter on his assigned days. She told him if he wasn't taking her as often, he'd need to pay more child support, since that's calculated based on how many days he has her. She even showed me their text exchanges as proof. I had wondered about the canceled holiday, too. He told me his ex had demanded he cancel it, but she showed me the messages from around that time and at no point did she ask for that. Instead, there was just a message from him to say, "Oh, something came up, so we're not going." We talked for a long time, and I asked her a lot of questions. The real reason they broke up? He'd cheated on her with a colleague. He didn't even say anything, just packed his bags and moved out, straight in with the colleague, leaving his ex and their daughter behind. He didn't see his daughter for 4 months. Zero contact. Ignored all calls. All he did was send a small amount of money every so often. When he finally decided to be part of his daughter's life again, the ex welcomed it and tried to facilitate the reunion. But the affair partner wasn't kind. She bullied and abused the daughter, and my boyfriend ignored it all or came up with excuses. The ex had to get the courts involved. Eventually, while the affair partner was around, their daughter wasn't allowed to stay over. After the affair partner left him for someone else, and after plenty of court-mandated steps, he was eventually allowed unsupervised visits again. She showed me proof of all of this. I told her about the way my boyfriend has been treating me, the constant picking, the sudden fights, the staying out late. She told me he behaved exactly like this when he started cheating on her. I started digging. I checked his phone, nothing suspicious, no texts, no DMS. But the vibe was off. Then, I stumbled on emails confirming he had cancelled our holiday, despite what he told me about not getting a refund. He did get a refund. And I have no idea where that money ended up. I discovered a few things. The colleague he'd cheated with had moved away, but recently moved back. Her social media shows she's single. There's no obvious sign that they are meeting, but her return lines up with the time when he started being awful to me. I also found out he's stashing a second phone in the study, one I've never seen before. He always trades in old phones when he upgrades, but this one is different. It stays on, is fully charged, and he always grabs it before he leaves the house alone. I actually spied on him as he took the phone from the office and put it in his pocket. Whatever's on it, he clearly doesn't want me to see. I haven't confronted him yet. I don't have concrete proof, but there's only a handful of reasons to keep a secret phone, and none of them are good. Whether it's about the colleague or not, this is bad. I want to talk to him, but unless he can give me a rock-solid, totally believable reason for all of this and for the lies about his daughter, I won't believe a word. And, at that point, it's over. The hardest part is his daughter. I've grown so close to her, I love her, and our bond is strong. Her birthday is soon. If I pull the trigger on this, I lose her too. But I can't live like this. I can't ignore the kind of person he is. I can't look away from what he allowed to happen to his own daughter. I can't pretend I don't know he's lying. I'm so lost. I just don't know what to do. Update 3. Let me recap how everything unfolded. I was with my ex-boyfriend for about a year and a half before everything unraveled. Things started off well between us, but that changed over time. He became distant, he treated me badly, and eventually I discovered he was hiding a second phone. Then came the real shockers, some truths about his past that I could never have imagined. There were several reasons for our breakup, but once all of this came to light, splitting up was inevitable. One thing that made the breakup especially hard for me was his daughter, Amy. She's 12, not her real name, of course. Amy and I got along so well, she felt like family to me. It could have been so easy to lose her too, but thankfully, her mom Jane stepped up in ways I never expected. Jane wasn't my best friend or anything, but she was always so warm and thoughtful, making it possible for me to stay in Amy's life. She even invited me over for weekly dinners at her place with Amy. That meant a lot to me. But here's where things got complicated. Back when I was still with my ex, he'd always say the nastiest things about Jane. According to him, she was constantly trying to squeeze more money out of him, threatening to stop him from seeing Amy over the smallest things, forcing us to cancel our own plans last minute. I listened to him vent, and that's what I thought it was, venting, but my gut told me something was off. He also painted Jane as this controlling, abusive ex, saying their breakup was all her fault. The truth was nothing like the picture he painted. I eventually learned, with proof, that he was the one who cheated on her with a coworker. He was the one who did a series of terrible things. Actually, some of those things are among the reasons I left him. The more I pieced everything together, the guiltier I felt for having let his words linger unchallenged. I never joined him in bashing her, I just stayed silent and let him talk. Maybe I was naive, but I thought he was just blowing off steam. And it wasn't all the time, just every now and then. Still, silence felt like complicity once I realized the truth. What made it all worse is that he hadn't just told me these stories, he'd warped Jane's image for anyone who would listen. His friends, co-workers, all of them believe she was some abusive narcissist. They tossed around the word crazy like it was fact, never questioning his side of things. Knowing what I knew, I couldn't keep it in anymore. I sat Jane down and told her everything my ex had said behind her back. I laid it all out, the lies, the things he'd told others, even the stuff I'd been too uncomfortable to repeat before. Jane was calm and gracious, thanking me and assuring me she didn't blame me for believing him at first. Together, we talked about what she wanted to do next. Jane decided to clear the air with some of their mutual friends. She told them the real reasons he wasn't allowed unsupervised custody of Amy, explained the truth behind their divorce, set the record straight. The reaction was immediate and dramatic. Those friends were shocked. They believed his version for years, never suspecting the opposite was true. Very quickly, the fallout began. Most of his friends cut him off entirely. They stopped inviting him out, dropped him from group activities, and one of the former mutual friends even confronted him about everything he'd said and done. My ex's life started collapsing around him, socially at least. He turned his anger on me. Furious, he accused me of betraying his trust, interfering in things that weren't my business, and airing dirty laundry that I had no right to share. According to him, I'd ruined his life, he'd lost his friends, and it was all because of me. He called me petty and pathetic. Now, I can't help but wonder if I crossed a line, if I should have stayed quiet instead of encouraging Jane to set things right. I truly believed I was doing what was right, but after seeing the aftermath, I can't shake the fear that maybe I went too far. Should I have just stayed out of it? Did I make things worse? All along, my only intention was justice, but now even I'm questioning if I made the right choice. Update 4. 2 days after everything blew up, an unknown number texted me a screenshot of a hotel reservation with my full name in the guest field and is in billing. The dates matched the exact weekend he told me his ex had threatened to keep Amy if we went away. Under it, a second screenshot of a bank app showing the refund from our cancelled trip, then a smaller debit 15 minutes later to the hotel and 2 separate payments to something called Skybit. The sender followed it with, "I think you deserve to see this. I'm sorry." I stared at the name for a minute before it clicked, the coworker. The one he'd left Jane for. The one who'd moved back. She didn't open with small talk. She said he'd reached out to her right before Christmas, love bombing, swearing he'd done so much work on himself, and painting me as the reason he wasn't seeing Amy. He said Jane was a monster and I was worse. He'd booked the hotel, sent her photos of flowers and a dinner confirmation, then bailed on her last minute with the excuse that my crazy girlfriend sabotaged the trip. She only found out he was lying because a mutual coworker forwarded Jane's post clearing the air. That's when she looked back through their messages and realized half the things he'd said had timestamps that overlapped with the screenshots Jane shared. She told me she wanted to wash her hands of the whole thing, but she couldn't just shrug and move on knowing I was still in the dark. Then she sent everything, their messages, the hotel confirmation thread where he joked about parking Amy with her mother because fun dad's busy, and a photo of the second phone is on the table in a bar, face up on a betting app. I called Jane. We were meant to see each other that night anyway, but I couldn't sit with it alone. When I showed her the texts, she didn't look surprised, she just looked tired in a way that made me feel sick. We decided not to tell Amy anything until we had to. We also decided to tighten everything up, not as revenge, but because pattern recognition stops being a theory when the same trick appears with new names attached. Jane called her solicitor the next morning and asked for an urgent review of the custody order. She'd let the rope go slack for a long time in the name of peace. Now, that rope had wrapped around everyone's throats. He got wind of it fast. The mutuals might have cut him off, but he still had 1 or 2 people willing to pass messages. The day after Jane filed, he started calling me from the unknown number. Then he called from his work desk phone. Then he drove to my place. He didn't bang on the door, he just stood at the bottom of the stairs, hands on hips, and shouted up that he wanted to talk like adults. I watched him through the peephole until my chest stopped rattling and called Jane and told her to keep Amy inside that week. The last time he spiraled, he'd pulled the same trick: show up, love bomb, then switched to vitriol the second you say no. When he realized I wasn't going to let him in, he left. 10 minutes later, my phone chimed, a wall of texts about how I'd ruined his relationships, his friendships, his daughter's chance at having a proper father. Then a single line that did me in: Amy loved you. Now she'll learn what happens when people make trouble. His timing couldn't have been worse for him, because he tried to stage a performance at Amy's birthday party. Jane had booked this cute community hall that has a climbing wall and those inflatable obstacle courses. It was kids and paper plates and noise and the gentle chaos of 12-year-olds sugared up. He wasn't on pickup duty that day, he knew it. He walked in anyway with a smile like he expected applause. Amy froze halfway through laughing at a balloon hat and went quiet so fast I felt my stomach drop. Jane stepped in front of her before he could get close, and it was like I could watch the bolt slide back in her. He did the soft voice thing. Just 5 minutes, babe. Dad wants to give you your present. He had nothing in his hands. Jane told him to leave. He did it. He kept his voice low but raised enough for parents at the other tables to start turning. He pointed at me. She thinks she can tell people how to parent now? Is that? You think you can come into my family and rearrange it? I took a step back because I could feel my body trying to answer him without permission. Jane never moved. She didn't shout. She told him she'd called the police and that he could either walk out on his own or on their time. He didn't believe her until the woman who runs the hall, bless her, walked up and said, "Sir, your time is up. Please leave." He went. He stood in the car park for 10 minutes after that, pacing, until a patrol car rolled past and he left properly. Amy went back inside and climbed the wall like none of it had happened. She came to find me later with a slice of cake and sat down next to me and said, "Do you want the corner piece? I know it's your favorite." I don't think I've ever been so grateful to be handed frosting. 2 days later, Amy found the second phone. She wasn't snooping. He'd left it in the glove compartment of his car, and she went to grab her forgotten hoodie after school, and there it was, buzzing like a trapped bee. She took it to Jane because she thought it might be mine. Jane plugged it in to see whose it was and the home screen popped up without a passcode. The wallpaper was a photo he'd taken of Amy from behind, hair in a ponytail, walking up the steps to our old flat. Jane didn't scroll through months of things, she opened the top thread, because the preview flashed my name. It wasn't to me. It was to the coworker. She thinks I'm working late. Got the kid dumped back at her mom's because my name is doing her controlling thing again. Can't wait to get out. Can't wait to have a normal woman. Under it, a notification from Skybit about a responsible gambling reminder because he'd hit a limit. Under that, a banking app paying about an overdue credit line tied to online betting. Then, in a different chat, a message to someone saved as Tom Jim with a string of numbers that looked a whole lot like odds. Jane brought the phone to her solicitor. They took careful notes about chain of custody. They didn't need the content for the current hearing anyway, the consistency of his no-shows and that birthday stunt were more than enough. But it mattered, because the judge asked him outright why his visitation had been so patchy. He said work had been intense, that he'd been dealing with harassment, that he had been depressed because his daughter was being kept from him. Jane's lawyer asked if he'd like to explain the betting account. He tried to laugh it off. Then she produced the overdue credit notice with his name on it. You could feel the pivot in the room. Work doesn't charge you interest. The order changed that day. He lost overnights again for the time being, with a review set in 3 months, and he was told to use a co-parenting app for all communication. He was also ordered to enroll in a gambling support program at parenting class. I don't know if any of that will stick. I do know that when he walked out of the courtroom, he shot me a look like I'd ripped open his ribs and reached in with both hands. I didn't go near him. I sat on the step outside with Jane and we watched a dad in a navy suit teach his toddler how to jump down one marble stair at a time. It felt like the universe rubbing salt on purpose. He spiraled that week in the way he always spirals, apologies that were really demands. He sent a wall of text about fate and second chances and how no one else understands him the way I do. He sent a voice note crying, saying he'd made mistakes and he needed me back to make him better. Then the next morning, when I didn't reply, he flipped and called me a snake and said he was going to make sure I never saw Amy again. I forwarded everything to Jane and blocked him everywhere that wasn't the co-parenting app, which I have no business being on in the first place. He tested the edges by sending me a Venmo request for £7 30 with a note that said you owe me for the pizza you ate. I declined it. He sent a follow-up saying you're petty. I stopped laughing when I realized I had physically flinched at a phone buzz. The coworker sent one last message and then blocked me too. She said, "I'm moving again. Good luck," and I wished her whatever version of peace looks like packing boxes and promising yourself the next postcode will be quieter. Later that night, one of the mutuals he had left reached out and told me he'd been fired. Not for the personal drama apparently, you can lose friends and still keep your job, but because he'd started signing off on overtime he hadn't worked, and someone in payroll put the math together when HR flagged the betting app notifications in his browser history on a work device. I don't know whether that felt like karma or tragedy. Probably some exhausted blend of both. Amy asked me, at dinner this week, if it was okay that she texts me when she's at her dad's, when he earns that back. I told her she never needs permission to talk to me. She nodded, serious in that way kids get when the adults around them have set fire to the easy parts. Then she asked me if I wanted to help her pick paint colors for her room. She wants clouds on the ceiling. Jane said yes before I could even answer, like she'd already decided we would do the latter work together. I thought I would feel like I toppled a domino line I had no right to touch. Instead, I feel like the dominoes were always falling. I just happened to be present when they started making noise you couldn't ignore. I can't make him be a father. I can't make him tell the truth. I can't make him want to be anything but the main character in someone else's pain. I can bring cupcakes to a birthday and step between a door and a person who wants to kick it in with charm. I can pick paint colors. I can love a kid in a way that doesn't disappear just because a man I thought I knew does. Update 5. We painted the clouds. Amy picked the softest blue on the chart, something with a name like Sky Whisper, the kind of color you can only say if you're smiling, and we rolled it on while she lay on the floor with a pencil tucked behind her ear, tracing where she wanted the edges to fade. Jane climbed the ladder with me and we did the softening with an old dry brush, feathering out the edges so there weren't any hard lines, just breathe marks against a pretend sky. Amy stood in the doorway when we finished and tilted her head the way she does when she's thinking hard, and then she said, "That one looks like a whale." When I squinted and finally saw it, I wanted to cry over latex paint because something about putting a sky on a ceiling felt like sneaking hope in through a gap he hadn't noticed. He noticed other things. At 11:30 am that night, the doorbell went at Jane's. 2 officers in high vis with their hats under their arms were on the step. One had that tired-faced people who work night share, the one that says please don't make this any harder. "We had a call," he said, voice pitched gently. "Allegation of a child in immediate distress at this address. We do need to check." Amy was in pajamas with paint on her ear and her face flushed from laughing at a video she and I had made attempting to do a cartwheel without cracking into the hallway table. She stood behind Jane with her hands wrapped in the back of her t-shirt, waiting to see if this was a game or a test. Jane invited them in. They clocked the cake tin on the counter, the wet paint smell, the stupid clouds, the pile of birthday gift bags flattened and ready for the recycling. They spoke to Amy in the living room for a minute and then stepped back into the hall and said they were sorry to disturb us, but they had to come. Jane asked if they could please note the call as malicious if their forms allowed. "We hear that word a lot," one of them said, not unkindly. They gave us a reference number anyway. When the door clicked closed, Amy let go of Jane's shirt and went to stand under the whale cloud again. "I don't like the night police," she said, and then like a kid who has decided she can solve anything, "Can we draw a sheep next to it? So it's not alone." The next morning, Jane's phone rang from an unknown number. Social services. A report had been made by a concerned party about a non-relative woman occupying an inappropriate role in Amy's life, and further allegations about neglect. You could hear the script in the social worker's voice, the careful pacing of someone who knows they walk into rooms that explode. Jane asked them to come by that afternoon. If something had to be poked, better to let it be here in the light than in whispers. They came. They sat at the dining table and asked the right questions in a tone that made it harder to lie to them, even if we had wanted to. They spoke to Amy at school the next day, too, with a safeguarding lead sitting in, and I spent that afternoon in a chair so straight back my ribs hurt, staring at emails I couldn't read because the thoughts skittered stupidly through my brain that we should have used a drop cloth, because I could see a perfect thumbprint of blue on the skirting board under the radiator. The social worker called on Thursday and said there were no concerns, the case would be closed, but if anything else happened, to ring her direct line instead of going through the switchboard. "This isn't the first call we've had recently linked to your daughter's father," she added, the tiniest sigh hidden in the space between daughters and father. "We're building a picture. I made tea and forgot I'd left the tea bag in until it went bitter." He didn't stop at that. A brown envelope slid through my letterbox the next morning addressed in block capitals like a child had tried to disguise their writing. Inside, a letter from a law firm with a name so generic it sounded made up, accusing me of defamation and harassment and warning me to cease all communications with his friends and with minor child A. It was stamped with a crest you could have drawn from memory if anyone had ever asked you what a crest looked like. Jane's solicitor read it, hummed once like a disappointed teacher, and fired back an email to the sender asking for their SRA number. The email bounced. It was almost funny until I realized my hands were shaking and had been since the night police. 2 hours later my phone pinged, with an alert from a credit agency I signed up to after this all started turning into a slot machine of bad surprises. "New hard inquiry on your report." At 2:11 a.m. Someone had applied for a catalog credit in my name at an address I haven't lived at for over a year. I called immediately. They read the application back, my name, my date of birth, my old street, and it was like hearing the echo of a version of me he kept for a rainy day. I put a fraud alert on my file and filed a report with Action Fraud because if I didn't do it in that exact order, the panic would dream up 100 reasons to stop me. That evening, a courier tried to leave a box with sneakers I would never buy in the size he wears. The label had my name spelled right, his postcode, and a drop-off note, if not in, leave with neighbor and 3 up. We sent it back unopened and I wrote the incident number on a post-it and stuck it to my monitor because the act of making a note of something had started to feel like setting down a bag you didn't realize you were carrying. In the middle of all of it, I had tea with his mom. She texted like someone who had practiced and erased and practiced again before hitting send. I'm her name. I think we should talk, if you would be willing. We met in a cafe that had wobbly tables and a chalkboard with the soup of the day written so hard it had dug grooves in the slate. She held her cup like it was keeping her on the surface. I always wanted to believe the next thing would be the last thing, she said without preamble. I don't know what you've been told about me. I don't even know what he tells himself. She told me about the years of scrapes he'd gotten into small at first, then larger numbers attached to larger lies. The time he sold his dad's watch to pay off a bet and said it had been stolen. The time she let him move back home for a month to reset and woke up to a bailiff's letter with her address on it and a debt she didn't recognize. She slid a shoebox across the table to me with both hands, like she was surrendering something. Inside were photos: Amy as a toddler standing on tiptoe out a window, Amy at 5 in a witch's hat, Amy asleep on a sofa with her fists curled, nap furious. He was meant to take these when he left the last time. He never came, she said. I know you still see Jane. I know Jane is. Jane. Could you give these to her? Or keep them until you know it's a good day to bring out a picture? She told me he'd asked her to call social services about the new woman in Amy's life. She said no. I told him I was done being the emergency exit he runs through when he set his own room on fire, she said, and for a second I recognized where his voice had learned its cadence. He had his first supervised contact at the center here on Saturday. It's all fluorescent lighting and laminated posters and a woman at a fold-out table who radiates no nonsense. He arrived with a bag of pound shop toys he hadn't taken the price tags off, and when she didn't run over, his mouth went then. He did the script anyway. Hey, kid. Dad's here. Look, I got you all this. She played Connect 4 with him and asked him about work the way you ask a stranger what road they took to get there. He said, like he knew I'd hear it somehow, you can't tell my name. She got what she wanted. Everyone's turned against me now. The supervisor wrote it all down on her little pad without looking up. When the hour was over, Amy stood because the woman in charge told her it was time, not because she wanted to please him, and that is a kind of small rescue I didn't know would feel like breathing out after months of holding air in my cheeks. He tried the library next. I volunteer at the Saturday morning story time once a month. It's tiny chairs and a rug with an alphabet wound round a cartoon zoo. 3 pages into the Gruffalo, he came in wearing a smile like a sticker that wouldn't stick. Didn't know you were such a big reader, he said, too loudly. The librarian moves so fast I wondered if librarians train for stampedes. She stepped between us in a way that didn't look like stepping at all, just like someone deciding to exist in a different place. You'll need to leave, she said, voice kinder than the words. He tried to talk through her. I'm trying to talk to her about my daughter. This is not the place, she said. He said my name like it was an accusation. 2 dads at the back of the room who had been whispering under their breaths both stood up at once like a single person. He left. We finished the book. The mouse outwitted the monster. The kids clapped. I didn't stop shaking until I'd put the puppets back in their drawer. That night, he emailed my manager at work from a burner account with a subject line in all caps, concern about one of your staff. He pasted a collage of screenshots of nothing my Instagram with a photo of cupcakes Jane and I had made for the party, inappropriate boundaries with a child, a crop shot of me walking with Amy's hand in mine from the back, unauthorized contact, and a paragraph about ongoing investigations. My manager called me into a room with glass walls and said, carefully, I would like you to know this was sent, and I would also like you to know I have already filed it in a folder called Ridiculous. She asked me if I felt safe. I said yes because my mouth didn't know how to form maybe. The review hearing on the interim order was brought forward after the welfare check. The judge didn't let him dance this time. She looked straight at him and asked if he had made any anonymous reports. He said no, one hand on his chest like he was doing a school pledge. Jane's solicitor placed a transcript of the co-parenting messages on the table with his line, might have to get creative to make you see what damage you're doing. The judge stared at him until even he couldn't hold the eye contact. Overnights remain off the table. The center visits continue. He's to provide proof of attending the gambling program instead of just emailing a screenshot of the homepage. There was a sentence near the end about consideration of a non-molestation order if this pattern persists, and he looked like someone had turned the power down. A notch in his bones. After, we sat on Jane's sofa and went through the shoebox. Amy pulled out a photo of her at 2 with a plastic crown on crooked and said, "I remember that dress," and then, "Because kids collect joy like magpies even when the adults are flapping, can we make scones this weekend?" Jane said yes. I said I'd bring jam. We lay on the rug under the new sky and Amy pointed at a cloud that looked nothing like what she said it did and insisted anyway. "That one is definitely a ship," she told me, strict as a judge. Leaving, she added, almost as an afterthought. It took me a second to realize I'd been holding my breath again. When it left my body, it did it quietly, just air moving in a room where the police don't need to knock and letters don't have crests and the ceiling has a whale that is absolutely not alone.